Having a properly packed 72-hour kit can make all the difference in situations just like these. Our goal is for all of you watching to know exactly what you need in order to be prepared for whatever life throws at you. We've been doing a series on these 72-hour kits, and today we're going to show you what all your 72-hour kit should consist of. As the seasons vary, so will your needs. So today we're going to address what all you need, what's nice to have, as well as what you'll want to rotate out given the season. So real quick, what is the 72-hour kit? Essentially, it's everything you need to survive for 72 hours, including food, water, and tools to get by in a wide range of scenarios. As the seasons change, so do your survival needs. When it's hot, you're going to need extra water and shady clothing. Then when it's cold, you're going to need additional layers to keep warm. Each season brings its own challenges, but by the end of the video, you'll know exactly how to prepare for either season. Now, we're going to deconstruct the 72-hour kit I have built here. It looks like a ton, but it actually weighs out to just under 25 pounds. So light enough most people wouldn't have any trouble carrying it. All right, let's get started with the most essential items first. The most important resource is always water, because it doesn't take long or much strain to become dehydrated. The rule of thumb is that each person have 1 gallon of water per day. 3 gallons of water weighs about 25 pounds on its own, so it's not very realistic to keep that much water in your pack. I do keep 2 water bottles in my pack for immediate water consumption, as well as a 2-liter hydration bladder that I can either pour the water bottles in or fill separately. I then have these 2 1.3 gallon bags that I can fill, giving me a total of 3 gallons of water storage between the hydration bladder and these bags, which is all the water I would need for 3 days. Now, I do have other means of cleaning water that I can find along the way. I keep my Sawyer mini water filter in this Ziploc bag with all the other components, just so it's all together for when I need it. Now, I keep a few other things in here as well. I have a water purification tablets that I can put into water, and I also have these P&G water purification powders that you can pour into a container, and it's going to take all the dirty sediment, get it carried down to the bottom, and then the water on top is purified and ready to drink. I have yet to try these out, but stay tuned for future videos, and I'm sure you will see me put these to the test. Another great way to purify water is by boiling it. Since I have this camp stove on me, I'm able to boil water that I find as means of purifying it. So I have that option as well. Now on to food. These freeze-dried meals that have become popular are, in my opinion, the best option. Got a few big advantages. First off, being really light. For 4 servings of food, this is incredibly small, incredibly compact. But being in this powderized form, it's much more stable to temperature change than other foods that you put in your pack. A few other things I like to keep are these Costco chewy bars. They got protein in them, chocolate, tons of energy, fats, all the things that your body's going to need to continue operating well. Another fun thing that I like to have are fruit snacks. Having some sugar in your system is going to keep your brain working well and help with morale. So having some of these stashed away is a good idea. And something I should have mentioned while we were talking about water are these electrolyte supplements. This is a liquid IV, but if you have one of these packets per day, it's going to help quite a bit in keeping those minerals and electrolytes in your system to keep your muscles from cramping and to keep your brain working. So we've got food and water figured out, but what about shelter? Well, a tent is probably too big to fit. So we're going to have to make do with some other items. If you haven't heard of a bivy bag, you have now. It's essentially a waterproof sleeping bag that can be used on its own or in conjunction with a sleeping bag to retain more of your body heat. They're extremely compact, especially when compared to other shelters, and are helpful in a number of scenarios. I like these inexpensive Mylar ones with an orange exterior, making myself much more visible to rescuers. I also keep a poncho made out of the same material that can double as a tent, rain cover when strung up. Thick garbage bags are a great option as well. They take up very little space, and best of all, they're cheap. You'll also want to keep some paracord on hand to string up your makeshift shelter. Now, you won't want to wear the same clothes for 3 days, but you also don't have enough space for 3 entire wardrobes, so what should we do? Well, the most important layers to replace daily would be your undergarments. I recommend having 3 changes of socks and underwear, so at least the areas of your body that sweat and rub the most will stay fresh. I tend to keep 3 pairs of thin wool ankle socks year round, and then I add 2 sets of thick wool socks during the colder months. The idea is that I put on the thin socks first so they absorb the majority of the sweat. Then if it's cold, I put on the thick wool socks over the top as a second layer to keep my feet extra warm and also to keep the thicker socks fresh so I can reuse them each day. I have a second pair of thick wool socks for nighttime because you never want to wear sweaty socks to bed, so I keep the second pair specifically for nighttime. Then I can let my daytime pair air out overnight so that they're ready for the next day. But also, in case I were to get my socks and boots wet in cold conditions, I can pull my nighttime socks out of my pack to wear while I work on drying off my boots and daytime socks. I like to keep all my clothes in a waterproof bag for two reasons. First, being pretty obvious, to keep them dry. But the second being that I'm able to press all the air out of this bag, roll it up and cinch it tight, making it as compact as possible. Now, before we get into tools and gadgets, we need to talk first aid kits. The basic assortment that comes in most first aid kits is a great place to start, but I often find these kits to be a bit lacking, so make sure that they have whatever you need for your given environment. Now, given our mountainous terrain, I like to keep a roll of athletic tape in my bag so I can stabilize an injured joint like a wrist or an ankle. I also keep the sucker tool to extract venom from a snake or spider bite, but also as a way to force water as a means to clean a wound or rinse something out of your eye. This is a great place to keep prescription medication, as well as other things you might need like ibuprofen, Tums, whatever else. I also keep a pair of nitrile gloves in my kit, so if I need to mend somebody else's wounds, I can keep their blood off me and keep the wound sterile. A dust mask or even an N95 is not a bad idea to have in case the air isn't safe to breathe due to smoke, toxic exposure, or illness. Now for the fun part, tools. First, we have our general multi-tool. Typically comes with a knife, can opener, and pliers. Next, we want to have some methods for fire starting. There's nothing better than a Bic, but I believe in having a backup plan, so I also have waterproof matches, flint and steel, and something to burn for a minute in case everything around me is too wet to start. I like this wax cordage that's strung through a metal straw that I can burn as long as necessary to get the fire started. Then I can pull it back into its metal straw, depriving it of oxygen and putting out the cordage for later use. Getting a fire started will give you some light, but you'll also want some flashlights to allow you to see further. I like to keep a headlamp as well as a handheld flashlight for a few reasons. One, having a headlamp frees up your hands for other tasks, while a handheld flashlight typically offers more light and range than a headlamp. But also, because I believe in having backup plans in case one of the flashlights isn't working or runs out of batteries. Speaking of which, keeping an extra set of batteries can be a lifesaver, as well as a power bank for your phone and other electronics. My headlamp is both rechargeable and takes AAA batteries, so I got multiple options to keep it running. Just make sure that you also pack the cables necessary to charge your device and make sure that they work. I've put cheap cables in my bag before and in a pinch, found out that my phone didn't like the cables and wouldn't take a charge. I'd hate for that to happen to you in an emergency, so just make sure that your phone likes the cables that you pack. A small shovel is a great addition, although it is heavy. If you plan on building a fire for warmth, having a shovel will make that much easier to make the fire pit that retains the heat. Using the shovel to dig down and keep the wind off the fire is helpful, as well as being able to dig up loose rocks to make a fire ring that will retain even more heat. I also like to keep a pruning saw on hand for cutting wood, either for firewood or to construct a shelter. This little 7-inch Corona is about 20 bucks and works like a charm. Another item that's great for a number of things is electrical tape. You can fix holes, connect waterproof layers like a trash bag and a poncho together for a shelter, or use it in first aid to cover a small puncture wound. Electrical tape rolls are pretty small, so it doesn't take up nearly as much space as duct tape, yet it can be used in a lot of the same tasks. Now, you'll only be able to fit a certain amount of tools in your bag, but in an emergency, you're likely going to be getting your family or group together first. There's no point in myself and my wife having a shovel in our bag, so we can split up many of these tools between the members of our group to lighten each person's load. Just make sure that you're not going without a vital tool in case you aren't able to get everyone together before disaster strikes. You'll want to have some means of navigation stashed away in your pack as well, because there may be a scenario where you can't rely on your phone's GPS to get around, either because of access to the internet or limited electricity. I keep a map of our state in my pack, as well as an off-road trail map of our region, so I know which roads go where. If you have to go off trail, it's important to know which direction you're going, and sometimes that can be difficult to tell by the sun, so having a compass will keep you headed in the right direction. Now, for hygiene, we're going to try and keep from smelling like a Sasquatch out here by keeping wipes and sanitizer on hand. I'm not worried about deodorant in an emergency like this, but avoiding jock itch is essential to staying mobile. You can use dude wipes like these or baby wipes, maybe even designated washcloth as your portable sponge bath to keep your pits and bits safe from a fungal infection. You'll likely need to take a number 2 during the 72-hour period, so having wipes and some toilet paper on hand will keep you from resorting to other options. On that note, let's talk about cooking. Depending on what you have to eat, you'll likely need some heat to prepare your food. Camp stoves have gotten quite compact and efficient since jet boils hit the market. Now, there's cheaper options out there like the Fire Maple or this lithic stove that's no longer on the market. Now, you don't have to have a camp stove if you're in an environment with plenty of burning material, but you will need some kind of pot to boil water in. These camp stoves fit the fuel, stand, and everything you need inside the cooking system, taking up about the same amount of space that the small pot would that you need to boil water anyways. So I think it's a worthwhile investment, especially if you enjoy backpacking. Now on to our seasonal items. During the summer, you won't need nearly as much clothing to keep you warm, so you can either fill that extra space with additional water to help you battle the heat, or go with a lighter pack. You want to have some outerwear to protect you from the sun, like this hooded sweatshirt. Sunscreen can be vital, as well as aloe vera to deal with any burns. Insects can cause all sorts of problems, and they tend to be more of a problem during those warmer months, so that's when I keep this in my pack. So during the warmer months, you need to protect against sun and bugs. Colder months, on the other hand, your main concern is not freezing. So we're going to keep a set of thermals and 2 pairs of wool socks that I talked about earlier. A beanie, gloves, and a balaclava maintain a lot of body heat without taking up much space, so I highly recommend this trio. A puffy jacket also packs down quite small and covers up your entire core, so I consider this a must-have. We also have these handy little hand warmers that actually come in all sorts of sizes to go on your feet or even on your back. Now, during this 72-hour period, you're probably going to want to sleep at some point, but getting sleep in the cold can be tricky. They make really impressive cold weather sleeping bags, but they tend to be bulky and cost a small fortune. In order to have something small enough to fit in your pack, we're going to take a 2-stage approach. I have this fleece sleeping bag that's rated for 50 degrees. If I use this inside of my bivy bag, I can get away with going into much lower than 50-degree environments. Another compact item that will make a big difference to your sleeping experience is a sleeping pad. More of your body heat is lost against the ground than on top of you, despite the fact that heat rises. This is due to the thermal mass the ground holds, as well as your insulative layers being pressed flat, making them far less effective. So having an inflatable pad can keep you from actually contacting the ground, and some pads even retain or reflect your body heat back up to you. Now, I don't recommend going into a blizzard with a fleece, sleeping bag, bivy, and pad, but this is a setup that fits in your bag along with your other gear and will protect you from the cold far better than nothing. But if you slid off the highway in a snowstorm and had to stay a night or 2 in your vehicle, this setup would work just fine. Next, communication. Vital in a relationship, but even more vital in an emergency. We could talk for days about emergency communication methods, but walkie-talkies are a great place to start. If cell signal is down, walkie-talkies may be your only means of communication. Many have a NOAA weather channel that they can listen into to get updates on incoming weather conditions, so you can plan accordingly. Alright, that's everything you need to survive, for 72 hours at least. I'll have a list down in the description of everything I mentioned, as well as some links to purchase. Let me know if I missed anything in the comments, or which item you think is most valuable in a 72-hour kit. I intend on putting this pack to the test in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. Until next time, this has been Jake with Pantry Prep.